Islamophobia has been around for quite a while. It's been pronounced since 9/11 and has gone on. 2005, when the July the 7th attacks took place, there were a whole series of laws that were passed in this country and that have been passed over the past 14 years, which de facto apply only to the Muslim community because they are seen to be the ones who are prone to committing acts of terrorism. That's the rhetoric that we've been told, so it's come from the top. Islamophobia wouldn't exist in the way that it does now had the politicians not targeted the Muslim community and said that they need to do more, that they are incubating extremism within them, that they are sympathetic towards Al-Qaeda and to ISIS and so forth. And of course, the truth gets lost in all of this because the greatest threat to the Muslim world comes from ISIS.
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm Hazel Allister from the Nottingham Mansfield Trades Council. I'm a teaching assistant and a trade union activist. I'm also the daughter of 1950s migrants. My parents came to England, bought a house, and both took full-time jobs. Having been a farmer as a boy and man, my father loved the outdoors and he took a job as a builder, and my mother was a nurse working 3 nights a week for more than 30 years before retiring to nurse my father at home through the last stages of cancer. And then she spent 15 years doing voluntary work until she passed away. So our family used housing. Myself and my 3 siblings were all schooled, and we all used the NHS when we needed to. And I have never been racially abused. In the early 80s, my friend Catherine moved to Wolverhampton and told me, "Oh, it's great here, it's lovely, but it's full of Pakis." I recall saying they weren't any different to her, as she was also the daughter of migrants. But like me, she happened to have white skin. I've lost touch with Catherine, but I imagine she is still a racist. Although she has probably learned not to blatantly say it. In her head and in her heart, she is likely to still be a racist. But there is hope for her children and grandchildren, growing up with friends at school who are Pakistani, Indian, Jamaican, Polish, Romanian, etc., etc. So there is hope for the future. As Nelson Mandela said, no one is born hating another person because of the colour of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, then they can learn to love.
I'm grateful that Hazel started by talking about Eastern European migration and the scapegoating towards them, because it almost seems such a long way ago now, the general election, where not a day went past really where UKIP or sadly other parties were involved in an auction in scapegoating Eastern European migration. It seems like such a long time ago, that election in which UKIP received 4 million votes, 1 in 8 voters voted for them. The Tories win a majority and instantly go on pushing a racist offensive. And it looked, didn't we? We heard commentators say England must be so different than Scotland. Scotland's moving to the left, England's moving to the right. Yet 3 months after that, we have hundreds of thousands of people on the streets saying refugees should be welcomed here. 400,000 plus people signing a petition demanding more is done for refugees. And 1 in 3 of the UK population has been involved in some way of helping refugees. What a massive polarisation that is, and I think that's something that's reflected actually across Europe, a massive polarisation, particularly on questions such as the refugee crisis. Those of us that actually want more done for refugees and want to welcome refugees, and the other side that push racist arguments, want to close the border and want to reject refugees. And we see this, don't we, in Germany. Germany's taken around 1 million refugees into the country, actually. They take more in some weekends than David Cameron has promised over 5 years, which really says it all. Among ordinary people, there's been people at train stations, at borders, waiting to welcome refugees. But actually, there's another side, isn't there? Even in Germany, that has responded quite well. We've seen the far right recently stopping a bus of refugees, telling people to go home. We've had actually the doubling of refugee shelters attacked in Germany, and we've seen across Europe really echoes from worrying echoes actually from the 1930s when we see. Denmark pushing through a law where they can take away refugees' jewelleries. The reason I talk about this polarisation, because I think it's absolutely, there's nothing inevitable which side of that polarisation is going to win out. I think it's concretely, as anti-racists, what we do to mobilise our side against the racist offensive that the government and media are pushing against us. And why we're here today, on a day to stand up against racism, to publicise a demonstration in London on March 19th, I think, yes, this is one day, but if we make that demonstration as big as possible, I think it's us on the offensive, laying down a marker that we're going to push back racism in this country. And I think, let's be absolutely clear, the government, like they've done for the last 5 years, are going to give us much of the same, austerity and war, and they're going to use racism as the cloak to divide us all and cover this up. It's absolutely clear, though, that there's now an opportunity for a principled anti-racist movement in this country that can push that back, and we don't do that at our peril. We've got the EU referendum, as many of you know, coming up. We can be absolutely clear that whether it's David Cameron on one side or Nigel Farage on the other, we're going to have the most disgusting racism push like we saw at the last general election, that refugees are going to be an absolute central question. Many of you would have seen the scenes in Calais this week, the appalling treatment just on our doorstep. We keep hearing a lot. David Cameron loves to talk about British values. He's offered the French more money, 17 million, to treat refugees like they've done this week.
Post the war on terror, it was our turn. And what's important for me, you may have heard of a man called Jerry Conlon, who was one of the Guildford Four, who was in prison for a crime he didn't commit and then ended up in prison for 16 years as an IRA terrorist because the police had hidden crucial evidence that could have exonerated him at court. I met him and we became close friends until his death in 2014. And the reason why I met him was because of our lawyer. Our lawyer was Gareth Pearce at the time. When I met her in 1998, it was in relation to a person who I was trying to help, who had been tortured in a prison abroad. And she said to me at that time, with quite a prescient view, is that it was the time of the Irish before, but I can promise you it's the Muslims next. And she was right. And she said this in 1998, before the 9/11 attacks, because Islamophobia had already begun to rear its ugly head. But when September 11th happened, and Bush said, you are either with us or with the terrorists, he said that this crusade is going to take a while. He rocked the world in ways from which we still have been unable to recover. And in fact, today, when we're talking about the refugees, although it's not right to blame the refugee crisis all on the West, but there's no getting away from the fact that had it not been for the interrogation of a man called Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi in the Bagram Detention Center in 2002 and then beyond, we wouldn't have half the refugees here that we are facing, and I'll tell you why. Because we're told of all of this obscurity about weapons of mass destruction and Saddam's threat and so forth, but really to this day we really don't know, other than the dodgy dossier, what was that evidence that so made our leaders determined to invade Iraq. And let me tell you, I was held by the Americans in 2002 after they had come to my house in Pakistan and abducted me in the middle of the night at gunpoint in front of my wife and children, shackled my hands behind my back to my legs and placed a hood over my head and carried me into the back of a vehicle to a secret detention site where both British intelligence and American intelligence were present, watching and interrogating. And they said to me afterwards, when they took me to the Bagram detention facility, which was an American air base held in Afghanistan after they occupied this country, where I saw 2 people beaten to death by torture with my own eyes. And it was there that the CIA said to me, if you do not cooperate, we will do to you what we did to a Libyan dissident that we captured in Afghanistan, who we believe was part of Al-Qaeda, Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi.
Everyone in this room is a victim of Islamophobia, because over the last 20 years, you've seen the diminishing of human rights in this country. We fought for Magna Carta against the king. The people did. We fought for our human rights. We fought for suffrage. We fought for equality laws. And day by day, they're taking these laws. The tenacity of this government is trying to stop trade unions the ability to collectively act against capitalism. It does not want us to have the ability to withdraw our labour for our protection. All of us are victims, and no matter what they say to divide us, whether it's on ethnic lines, whether it's on faith, whether it's on race, whether it's on gender, sexuality, we cannot be divided. For the sake of our children, we must unite. And that's why I'm going on the demonstration, because that is my defiance and solidarity, that I stand for the British rights of respect for freedom. That's why my grandparents fought in World War II. For freedom for everyone when they were in bondage under imperialism in India. We must stand united, and through unity we will get justice. And when we have justice, we'll have love, and everyone will come together.
Yeah, bravo.